There are signs, though, that, we may have seen the sort of peak in terms of inflation, not just here, but there are actually some encouraging signs around the world as well that I wanted to bring to you guys. And it's a big question mark where we ultimately go from here. Economists are saying it's very, very uncertain, and I think we should all be very cautious in any kind of predictions. But Eurozone inflation actually eased in November. Let's put this up on the screen. They say further rate rises are still likely. The annual rate of inflation in the Eurozone fell in November for the first time since mid-2021 as energy prices dropped. So that means that while prices continue to rise rapidly, they're no longer rising as rapidly as they were. That's a long way from inflation being under control or prices stabilizing. Doesn't guarantee the inflation rate won't pick up again, but at least we're seeing an easing of the pace of rising inflation. They also go on to talk about, and this is really interesting to me and gets to a point we've been making, which is that the toolkit of the Fed and other central banks is not really well suited to deal with the economic problems that we have right now. The reason they say inflation rates around the Eurozone have been coming down has nothing to do with central bank activity. Instead, it's been heavily influenced by government measures to protect households from surging energy prices. So, for example, in November, the Netherlands saw the largest fall in their annual rate of inflation, which plummeted to 11.2% as government caps on energy prices came into effect. So it's not their central bank that is really causing the slowdown in inflation. It's government legislative policy, which is what we have always said here is the toolkit you really need to deploy if you want to ease price pressures and make things easier for consumers.
Yeah, exactly. This is why even discussing inflation is so important. What inflation, what's contributing to it, and all of that. Let's put this next one up there on the screen, which is part of the reason why it feels like things are getting better here is gas. Yeah. So much of inflation and the way that we experience it and discuss it in America is gas prices. Right now, gas prices are continuing to fall. It's $3.47 a gallon on the national. And actually, California, for the very first time this morning in a long time, has dropped to $4.90 a gallon. I'm not going to cheer that. It's better than $6 a gallon than what it was earlier. The reason why that matters is just a year ago, we are almost normalizing to pre-Russian invasion levels of Ukraine. A year ago, it was $3.38. Now, that was higher for the national average than when Biden took office. It was actually a pretty precipitous rise. But because of COVID and the boom and all of that, getting back to $3 gas would be a massive achievement for the Biden. Well, I wouldn't say achievement because I don't think they have that much to do with it. But it would be a massive good
political win,
politically for them. Because especially on the heels of the midterm elections, to get back to 3. Can you imagine if he's heading into the presidential election at $3 gas, or maybe even lower, maybe $2.90, something like that? You should consider with regional differences, like that could even mean almost $2 gas in the state of Texas, and maybe $3.50 or something in California. If you do that, I mean, that's tremendously beneficial, especially because people in their minds would remember where it all came to. So look, it's one of those things where actually politically and for normal consumers, leaning on the central bank, not always the best choice. You really can use legislation to affect change and to stop the amount that people are paying both at the pump and even at the supply chain level. There's a lot of stuff the Biden administration can and should have done.
Right.
And would have been, look at the midterms. Imagine if he had actually declared full-scale war on the supply chain crisis.
Yeah.
Over a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
You could have kept the House.
They could have kept the House.
Easily.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, they obviously wildly outperformed. Right. They bucked history, all of that. But it's still pathetic that you're like, this was a win. And you're like, but you just lost the House.
And you lost the national popular
And you lost the popular vote
Yeah.
by 2 percentage points. So, and it was really based on the fact that they nominated a bunch of really out there people, and how long are you going to be able to rely on that? Meanwhile, any Republican who even had a semblance of normality, like the Brian Kemps of the world, romped to re-elect him. We'll put that aside for a minute. I mean, as one example of the type of action at the federal government level that matters in terms of inflation in the supply chain, like go back to the rail strike. You're going to have the freight rail industry hobbled by a loss of workers if they ultimately force this deal through. So It would be much better if we had a functioning government that was actually tackling the supply chain issues that have caused this situation, that we're actually going after the price gouging corporations that have caused this situation, rather than just continuing to lead on the Fed. But, you know, economically, it's a very mixed picture right now. I think we are in a very, very uncertain time. There was another, this is sort of a technical thing, but there was another technical indication that inflation may be slowing as well. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. They say the Fed is set to get some help in pausing as inflation gauge gap shrinks. So the difference between these two different price gauges, you can see there's a chart here up on the screen. You've got like a yellowish orange price gauge, and you've got the like the black line price gauge, and you see they've mostly hang out together, but they've kind of split. And the idea is that the one that is continuing to be high is going to revert back down to closer to where the one that is lower, the black line, is ultimately going to be. It's complicated, the reasons for this. They say that healthcare, housing weights and impact will shift and reduce the gap. And the one that is set to sort of like to lessen and paint a better picture of where we are with regards to inflation is the preferred index of the Fed. So again, it's a little bit technical, but basically the idea is there are some signs on the horizon that another one of the inflation gauges could be cooling as well. And finally, just to underscore something I mentioned earlier, while this is all going on and supposedly, you know, corporations are being squeezed and they're just having to pass the additional costs on to consumers, no, they're so sorry about it. It's a bunch of nonsense. Their profits have never been higher. Put this up on the screen from the Hill. Corporate profits hit record high of $2.08 trillion in the non-financial sector in the third quarter, even as 40-year high inflation continues to squeeze American consumers. And you've got an economist that they quote here, the chief economist of global wealth management at UBS, so no like anti-establishment figure here, saying the Fed should make clear that rising profit margins are spurring inflation. And, you know, I think that's part that a lot of mainstream economists have been trying to downplay. The Biden administration has occasionally made some nods towards it, but really done nothing about it. And it's disgraceful. It's another sign of how much monopolistic pricing power so many corporations have in our economy.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The corporate profit angle on that, it's weird. This whole economy, I don't think there's another word other than weird, because it's like you have high inflation,
fake
worker wages are going, it's like the corporate profits are high, but the stock market is down, but people are getting laid off, but also wages are decent. So you're like, well, what's going on here? But also you can't afford food. So is it good? Is it bad? It's one of those where part of the reason that the Fed is reaching for this is because in their toolkit, in their very, very narrow view of the economy, this is why we should have interest rates. But when you look at like quality of life, living, and more, it's very clear that that's not the instrument that you should be reaching for. You should be reaching legislatively. I'm not even ruling out some interest rates, but I'm saying the precipitous increase is clearly having a deleterious effect on the overall economy, something that major business leaders and entrepreneurs are also saying. So at that point, you know, when even like the high institutions of business are like, hey, hold on a second, like what are you doing? It's like a horseshoe really for workers and for the people who actually do some of the employment.
Very true. Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.